Hi there, this is Dr. Everybody with Project 6. Now, Project 6 starts our sequence of 4 projects that, in many respects, form the core of this course. And what we're going to do with Project 6 is we're going to read a file and we're going to put all that information into one data structure, in this case, a list of lists. And then we're going to process that information. So it's very much unlike Project 5, where we kept reading the file over and over again. We only did that because we just didn't have the tools to do it correctly. You'll never want to use Seek 0 again in this course. So we're going to read the data once into this list of lists and then process it. And then in the next, we're going to have 2 projects with lists and then 2 with the next data structure, which is dictionaries. Okay, so what do we have here? I still play hockey, so I decided to grab some hockey statistics. And this is some of the statistics of some of the great players in the game. And so we're going to read that into a file. And then we're going to extract some information out of it. Hockey players shoot with the left or the right, and they have different positions, their wings, or their centers or defensemen, and so on. We're ignoring the goalies in this particular set of statistics. So let's take a look at what we have. All right, so one thing is that there is a data file, scoring per game. You can open it in some kind of a spreadsheet. It's got a bunch of rows of data, a bunch of columns of data. And in fact, on each of these functions, you could actually, by hand go through and write down, what the functions return as something to do before you actually try to code it in Python. Do it by hand. It's not that big a file. So, all right. So let's take a look at this this specification here. Now, one thing is that this file is known as a CSV file. So if I look at it as a text file, every value in there is separated by commas. And that's a very common way to do things. In fact, if you have a spreadsheet, say an Excel spreadsheet, and you want to process it, one of the things to do is save it as in the CSV format, and then you can easily read it in with Python. We've seen this function before, and we'll see it many times again. Open the file and return a file pointer. I'll leave it at that. When we actually read the file, note this. We want to read it using this thing called this comma separated values module. And the reason is that within some of these data items, there are commas. For example, look at this column here. If it's a little hard to read, you could see, in any case, the values have commas in them. And if we just did a split on commas, we'd have trouble getting, it doesn't know the difference between a comma between columns and a comma that's within the numbers. And so by using the CSV reader, that understands it. And so we take the file pointer, that's what came from our open file, and we pass that into the read file function, and then we use it as the reader. And now to read through, we will we will use a for loop, and we'll walk through the reader, and so this reader is now representing the file. And as I show here by my naming, is that we get a list. So each line in that file will now be a list. And all we're doing in this file is blindly reading the data. So this is a list of lists. Each list will just be one row or one line of the data. Now, one thing I noticed in one of the earlier projects, even though we specified it, none of these functions print anything. Okay? And so don't put any print statements in here. That's and so we try to tell you that right there. Okay, so there's a set of these functions, and so we start off. Some shooters, some hockey players shoot left, some shoot right. And we say, oh, here you go. You get this information out of index 1. So there's index 0 in this file. Let me blow this up a little bit. That's index 0. And, how did they shoot? With left or right? And so that's, so we're just reading information out of that column and counting it up. Right? And like I said before, you can practice by doing that by hand. Not sure how I managed to do that. All right, so that was shoots lefts. We just read that column, index 1. The position, oh, well, that's the column labeled POS. All right, which is index 2. So we then we just go through and read that one. And again, we're going to now this time we're going to be reading the positions, and there are 4 different positions: L, R, C, and D. So we're going to return 4 integers in that order. So you count up 4 different things. You need 4 counters. Start them at 0 in the loop. Read through your list of lists. Notice every time we're reading through this master list that we created, we never read the file multiple times. We only read the file once, and so on. And we go through, and there are different columns, so we get a little more complex now. In this one, we actually look at 2 columns to get that. And then there's a set of functions that are a little different in that we're going to look for the top 10 of something. So who has the most points per game? Hockey, they keep track of points, which are either scoring a goal or getting an assist on helping scoring a goal. Game of hockey, the number of points you get is almost as important as the number of goals that you get. And so the way to do this is we're trying to get points per game. So what we will do is create a tuple which has, so we read a line, and we'll get the points per game. And we tell you which column that is. And then we also grab the player's name and their position. We've already seen those columns before. And we make a tuple out of that for each player. Right? And then we make a list of those tuples. And again, this is very much like what you did in Lab 6. And once I have that, I will sort. And sort all, unless we tell it otherwise, sort will always sort on the first value. So that's why we put it first. And you better make it a float, because you don't want to sort on the strings that indicate the number of points. So and then what we're going to do is sort in decreasing order, and then use slicing to take out the top 10. All right. So again, it takes its parameters as our master list of lists, and it returns a list of tuples, but that list of tuples is only 10 long, and it's only the top 10. And by the way, if you want an optional challenge, you can use list comprehension, and you can actually write this whole function in one line. That's not necessary, but if you like a challenge, you can do that. Something similar with games played. Okay, that's labeled GP. One of the interesting challenges of that is that the numbers have commas in them, so you have to convert them. So you must remove those commas to get an integer before we sort. And in this case, we have, this will be like the last one. We create a tuple for each player, and then we make a list of those tuples, and then we sort it, and we take the top 10. Okay? Just like the last one. And the same thing with shots taken. And again, we add, there's a little thing in there. So this comes out of the column labeled S. But one of the things in here is that some of these have no data. Okay, because what happens with older players, that particular piece of data wasn't collected. So you got Bill Crowley there. He's an old time guy, and they weren't keeping track of shots with that at that time period. So we'll just skip those guys because it wasn't recorded. So again, every one of these functions doesn't display anything. All the printing gets done in the main program. And so in the main program, you open the file, you read all the data into your list of lists, and then we go through and we just display the values in that order. And so a few things, okay? We do give you a file to start with. We give you a set of strings to help with the formatting. And in this case, we have a bunch of functions. Let me scroll back here. And we actually have a short file for you to practice with, and we do the testing of the functions using that smaller file. And then when we actually get around to running the test one, it just outputs these values. So like, for example, to get the top 10 points for games, you call the points per game function, and that returns you 10. And then you will then get this list of tuples and just print them out in that order. If you happen to be a Red Wings fan, of course, Gordie Howe shows up as having played the most games. Yeager comes out really high for shots taken, and Ovechkin is still skating these days. Points per game, the great one as he is known. And there's one interesting thing in there is we actually get a defenseman out of the Boston Bruins. I'm old enough that I saw Bobby Orr as a skate as a rookie. And I was also around for Gordie Howe to sing happy birthday to him on his 80th birthday. So yes, I'm an old hockey fan. That hopefully that gives you some ideas. Oh, there's one more thing I had in my notes here. Unfortunately, this made it across the boundary. Remember that when we print values, we need to add commas in there. And so we give the formatting on how to do that. And it's because it's got a little comma in there to help you out with that. And that's where when we're doing the printing, that's how we're getting commas into the output. So we do have that in there. All right, hopefully it's just sort of a walkthrough of what we have to do. Hopefully it gives you enough ideas on how to get started. Good luck. Hi there, this is Dr. Everybody with a quick addendum on Project 6. I thought it'd be a good idea to look at the data structure. And when you're reading the file and we're returning this list of lists, which I call the master list, well, what does it look like? And so what I have here is I have the code, the skeleton code that we provide, and I've actually implemented a couple of them. So, for example, I have the open file, and I have the read file, and one thing I can do is print the master list. And what does it look like? Now, if I just print it, it's a little hard to read, but you can see that there is one line of it, and what you've done here is you've created a list of lists, and if you look at this carefully, you can see that. So here's a list. This guy's Ziggy. That's his information. And then notice that's the end of the master list. So there's two of them there. And then if you go up, there's you'll see there's another bracket, and there's a comma, and there's a beginning, and there's Gretzky and all of his information, and another comma, and a bracket, and you can see everybody in there. Now let's just take another way that we can look at this is I can start up the debugger here and have it stop there, go to the next step, and again you'll see here that as long as I have the variable explorer checked, I can see my master list shows up here, and if I double click on that, you can see here are all the entries in there. So it's a list of lists, and again we can see that here. There's the one for this particular player, and there's the bracket for the master list itself. So it's a list of lists, and and the first one is Adam Oates, and then the next one is Alex Ovechkin. If I click on that, we can see all the information, and so there is so this is a list of lists, and I could, if I actually wanted to print these off, let me end the debugger there. I'll even get rid of that. I could do something like this for, say, player list in my master list, and I can print the player list. And if I run that, now it prints each one of these separately. So there's a list there for Ziggy, and there's a list there for Gretzky, and so on. And then I can say, oh, well, how about I grabbed names here. So what would a name be? A name is player list 0, and let's print the name without anything more. And notice how I'm doing this. I'm doing this in a way so that I can see what's going on. So I've only implemented at this point 2 of the functions, and I'm trying to get a sense of what I have here to work with. So whenever I code, I'm constantly printing things out, and one of the common mistakes to make is to type in the whole program and then try to figure out what's broken. If you take this kind of approach, you find out pretty quickly what's working and what's not working. And now you can see that yes, I have in fact figured out a way to get the name and to print it out. And I can, if I wanted to, for example, I could print the whole player list right afterwards, and so I'd be able to, oops, typo there, it's a player list. And now you can see I've printed out the name, and then right afterwards the whole list of all the players' stuff. And so now I can see what I'm printing and what I have to work with, And now it gets a lot easier to do, oh, the positions. Well, which column is the positions, and how do I extract that that information? So hopefully this little addendum helps you out. Good luck.